Okay, so this video will focus on the introduction of my essay. So it would correspond to the downward facing triangle in the basic essay structure that we looked at in my previous video. Now, this essay that we're going to look at is, it's 1,800 words. It's definitely longer than the one I'm asking you to write. And this introduction is more complicated than I'm asking you to write. All you really need to have is one paragraph that introduces your topic and has a thesis sentence underlined in it. But I decided to, in the spirit of writing as being not a science, but an art, I decided to have a little fun when making this essay and make a kind of personal sketch as a way of introducing the topic of arguing that video games have positive benefits for the player. So, this is only one way to open an essay. It's a somewhat more informal tone than you might expect to write in a college writing course. Because it opens with this scene of me walking in on my roommate playing video games and then kind of having a discussion with myself about, is his video game hobby negative or positive? And as we look at the text, you'll see this kind of dialogue going on in my mind. And this builds up to the thesis sentence. And then we get into evidence, and that will be the next video after this, the middle portion of the essay, the body of the essay, in which you provide evidence for why your thesis statement is true. So let's flip over to view of the text here. Okay, so we see the pretty standard opening format of an MLA style essay, and I'll have a video that explains more about what MLA style is. It just means a way of presenting an essay. So notice this beginning. Follow this template. Have your name right here, and then the name of the course, which in our case would be English composition, and then the date you finished the essay, and then the word count. And notice these are double spaced, right? And then we have a double space and the title, and then a double space and the first paragraph. Sometimes you'll see this format without this double spacing, but I think it's a good way of presenting the title. At least for our class, I think this is a good way to do it. And notice that the title is centered, right? And we can get into a discussion of what makes a good title. Notice that I've decided to have a little bit of a word game, a little bit of wittiness here. Virtual skills, the surprising benefits of video gaming. So, that virtual skills phrase there, I think it makes it a little more interesting than, say, just calling it the surprising benefits of video gaming. But, the surprising benefits of video gaming, that would be a perfectly adequate title for an essay. But just notice how adding something like this, adding this part, makes it look more academic, right? It looks more smarter. I'm having fun by saying that in an informal way, but part of this is making yourself look intelligent, look informed, right? Okay, so let me go on to read the opening of this. So like I said, you'll notice this is almost like a little short story here at the very beginning. And again, you do not have to open your essay with a little sketch like this, but I think it's a fun way to do it. And so just hear me out as I read it and see why I might have done it. Last Friday afternoon, I returned home to find my roommate in a highly agitated state. He was perched like a gargoyle on the edge of our living room couch. First, his eyes darted left, then right, then up and down. His fingers flicked furiously over a controller bristling with buttons. And every few seconds he gave out a hoarse shout of yes or no. On his enormous flat-screen television was Skyrim, the latest installment of the Elder Scrolls video game series. I asked him if he wanted a beer from the six-pack I'd bought. Without looking up, he said, maybe when I'm done killing things. Okay, so, this is a sketch, right? This is painting an image for the reader, and it's kind of getting them involved in the sense of telling a story, as opposed to simply having the boring introductory statement I often get in essays that says something like, this essay is about why capital punishment should be ended. It's fine. It's just kind of boring. So this is one way you can establish a little, what you might call emotional credibility with your reader, would be to make yourself into a real person. Notice that there's an I here, right? I asked him if he wanted a beer. These reveal me in a humorous way to be a real person. So maybe the reader will now listen to me a little more because I have this slightly tongue-in-cheek tone, right? Now, notice that when we get to this paragraph, the tone starts to become more formal and more what we expect from a standard essay. What comes to mind when you hear the phrase video gamer? Someone who has an entertaining hobby? Someone who knows a good way to relax after a long week's work? Or is it something more negative, a hunched antisocial figure mired in the depths of energy drink abuse, whose skill set is limited to digital fantasy worlds? Okay, and then I'll go on with the third paragraph here. I admit it. At times I've thought these negative characteristics apply to my roommate, but after giving it some thought, I realized that I might be simplifying the situation. As a non-gamer, what did I really know about his hobby? I decided to investigate the topic with more of an open mind. I did some research, and what I learned surprised me. Okay, so notice that the tone of this is establishing me as a kind of reasonable person, right? Someone who might say, oh, I could see this subject from someone else's perspective. I'm rational, I'm reasonable, I'm willing to listen to the opposite point of view. That's a good tone to set in an essay, as opposed to sort of ranting on about something and why your opponent's wrong. This is a kind of arm extended to the reader saying, hey, let's consider this issue together. Let's consider our conventional wisdom about video games. Is it accurate, or is there something more we have to learn about video games and how they affect the people that play them? Okay, so now we pull into, this would be sort of the end of the introduction, which ends in my thesis sentence, which is underlined. The unflattering image above may describe some gamers, but I would argue that it is reductive and simplistic. Although there are negative factors associated with video games, there's also plenty of evidence to suggest that gaming offers concrete benefits to the player and even to society in general. Okay, so this is a complicated thesis sentence, right? Yours does not need to be this complicated. It can state things a little more simply. But I phrased mine this way for some reasons, which get kind of unfolded in the rest of the essay. I started with, this is what I call the nod to your opponent. If we're having an essay here that argues that video games are in some way positive, if you phrase that as a pro or a con, you would say the opposite of my argument would be that video games are in some way negative, right? So what I'm doing when I say, although there are negative factors associated with video games, I'm giving the nod to my opponent. I'm saying, okay, you have a point, but there is also plenty of evidence to suggest that gaming offers concrete benefits to the player and even to society in general. Okay, so this nod to the opponent can make you as the writer seem kind of reasonable. Again, rational, reasonable, able to look at both sides of a debate, and that can kind of build your credibility with your reader, right? So in a sense, the most basic version of this thesis sentence would be this part. There's plenty of evidence to suggest that gaming offers concrete benefits to the player, period. That would be fine as a thesis sentence. But notice I've added in this little ending clause as well too, and even to society in general. Now what that does is it opens up the rest of my essay to, moving from just discussing the benefits for the individual player, and we broaden out to society in general. So that gives me more latitude to discuss evidence about video games being positive. So I'll have, as you'll see in the paragraphs ahead, I'll have evidence as to why video gaming is good for the player, and then it broadens out to why it might be good for society as a whole. Okay, so complicated thesis sentence, but you can look at, there's the kind of nugget of it, and these are kind of bells and whistles. This society in general and the nod to the opponent are bells and whistles that you can add to your thesis sentence. So again, that's kind of advanced thesis sentence writing. You don't need to do that. I just want to, as we go through this sample essay, show you some of the other moves and techniques that writers use that would elevate an essay from being just the basic argumentative essay to something with a little more art in it. So I think I will end this video here. Yes.